Hey, welcome back to the show, guys. Today I have a very special guest. I'm excited to talk with Dre Baldwin. He is an accomplished professional basketball player, author, YouTube extraordinaire. I mean, just Dre has done just about everything, and he's here to share with us a lot of information. Dre, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here, Brad. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I know a lot of the things, and like even on the background there, you got tons of books, and we're going to get into all that here in a minute. But start with tell us a little bit about your basketball, like how you came into doing what you do now. I know you started with some basketball. Give us a little bit of background about Dre.
Yeah, so I was always into sports and growing up in Philadelphia, now based in South Florida. I got the basketball around age 14, which is pretty late if you're trying to play college ball or pro ball, let alone. So high school, I only played 1 year, sat the bench the 1 year. I played college, walked on, did play, but I was playing at the D3 level, which is not really, the pros don't come out of that level. So getting out of college, nobody was checking for me to play pro, but I felt like I was good enough to play. So 1 year removed from graduation, because my first year I didn't really have an opportunity, I went to an event called an exposure camp, which is basically like a job fair for athletes. And I went there, played pretty well, and I leveraged my performance there to find myself an agent. Then that agent helped me get started playing overseas. So that's how I started playing ball overseas. This is in 2005 to give everybody a time frame here. And at the same time, I started putting footage on, clips of videos that I had on YouTube. And that's where that's when I realized later on that there was an audience of people who were looking on YouTube for someone to teach them specifically basketball and everything else too. But basketball was the lane that I was in. So then a few years later, I realized, hey, I can actually make more of this stuff. And I started doing it more intentionally. And that's where I'm sure we'll talk about this, is where I kind of built another business at the same time that I was playing pro sports. So I played pro ball up through 2015. Somewhere in the middle of that, there was a time period where this internet thing started to become a thing, where putting content online was actually it could be a business opportunity, or at least make some money on the side, if nothing else. Now we know it's a whole industry, but at the time you didn't see that until it started to happen. So that's when I started to create more content. I started writing more, which led to the books. I started making my own products and selling them to the basketball players who were following me, and also started talking about the mindset aspects of sports, because a lot of players were asking about it because they were getting the tactical stuff, like here's how you dribble, here's how you shoot. But they realized that they needed the mindset stuff too to make it work, right? So that started a 9-year career playing professional basketball. And at the same time, I'm putting footage on YouTube. And YouTube wasn't really a thing then. I mean, it existed, but nobody was doing it intentionally, like consistently, because there wasn't anything to gain from it. So I went and played ball for almost 10 years professionally. While doing that, you got a lot of free time on your hands when you play sports. So I was putting content online. I was also blogging. I've always been a big reader and a big writer. So probably about halfway through my career, about 2009, 2010, around that time, at one point, I was a free agent. So the phone was not ringing. And I had this audience online, and now you could actually start making some money from having content on a website like YouTube. So I started doing it more intentionally. I started writing more, because I had an audience of people who were reading my blogs, like my friends from college and stuff, because they're reading about my experiences playing overseas. That's when I also found out about self-publishing. You can write your own books and put your books out there. I've done traditional and self-publishing, so that's where the book writing started. And then I started creating my own products, because I had basketball players following me who were asking for help on getting better at basketball. So I started creating products, and that opened up another world to me, that I can take ideas out of my head, turn them into products, and sell them for money, also known as intellectual property. So all of those things kind of happened about halfway through my career. Luckily, the phone did ring again. I kept playing until 2015. But by the time I stopped playing, Brad, I already had products for sale, I had an audience of people, I had a framework for what we now call work on your game. And also, I've been talking about mindset a lot, because the players started asking me questions about mindset, because they were getting the physical tools. Here's how you dribble, how you shoot, how you jump higher so you can dunk. But they also were realizing, okay, Dre, I have all these physical tools, but I'm still not putting it all together. What's missing? And it was the mindset piece. And those pieces also, not only did I serve the athletes with them, it also led to me writing more books about that stuff. And it opened me up to an audience, Brad, of people who were not athletes, because they heard the messages I was putting out when I was just speaking about mindset. And they said, hey, Dre, this stuff applies to me the same way it applies to basketball players, and I am not even a basketball player. So that told me that I had a whole worldwide audience of people I could reach. They didn't have to be an athlete to learn from that piece of what I was doing. And that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last almost 10 years since I stopped playing.
Awesome. That's a heck of a resume there. Now, you probably don't know this, but we have a link in the basketball.
Okay.
You may have heard of a guy named Bruce Pearl.
Yes, Coach Tennessee.
Not familiar.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, when he won as a D2 coach for the University of Southern Indiana,
Mm-hmm.
my brother was on that team.
Okay.
And so my brother was on Bruce Pearl's championship basketball team. He was a senior playing for the USI.
Okay. Yeah.
So Brian Hebner, if you've ever heard the name before, that's actually my brother. So a little bit of basketball connection there. And he did actually look at going and playing European ball after college. It didn't work out for him for other reasons, but definitely a little bit of a connection there. So I wanted to bring that up. So
okay.
Now you said something important, which is the mindset stuff, right? Now I got to ask you this: have you read the book With Winning in Mind by Lanny Basham?
No,
have you ever read that?
I'm gonna look that up. I will read it.
You would probably appreciate it because he was an Olympic athlete who did a shooting sport, and for the life of me, I can't remember which one. But he basically, after winning the Olympics, went into like a depression and stuff, and he learned like a lot of these things about mindset, and so his teachings is all about mindset in sports. I think you would appreciate it coming from that, someone who's an athlete and doing a lot with mindset. So
yeah, I just saved it.
It's helped me a lot with a lot of stuff that I do.
Okay.
So you've written a lot of books. Like what, 35, 36 or something like that?
Yeah, who's counting?
Who's counting? Just 35. Now, there's a couple books that you've written that have been pretty popular. The one that stands out right now is The Third Day. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? What is the third day? Why do we need to care about the third day?
Well, that came from when I was putting the basketball content on YouTube, actually, because I would record. There's a gym I would record in here in Miami, and the gym would always appear besides me. It would appear the gym was empty besides me. And anybody who knows the basketball world, especially for youth, understands it's very hard to find a gym that you can practice in by yourself without interference from 100 other players all trying to play basketball, because it's a very popular sport. So these players got to asking me because they would see these videos I would put on YouTube, because by this point, I've been putting videos out on YouTube every single day, and they were on the court. So I had literally to this day, I probably have over 10,000 videos on YouTube. A certain amount of them are just basketball stuff, and then the rest of them are just me talking. But I had so many videos on there, even by that point. This is about 2013, 2014. And the player said, well, Dre, how do you always have an empty gym? Do you own a gym? Is it attached to your house? Do you rent it out so nobody else can use it? How are you have the gym to yourself all the time? And this is where I came up with this concept of the third day, because they were right in that the gym was most of the time empty besides me, but it wasn't always empty. Every now and then you have a random person being there, some straggler come in the gym, or somebody would come every day for about a week and then they would fall off and you wouldn't see them again. And I explained this concept that the first day of anything, when someone voluntarily signs up for it, everybody's all excited and they show up and they're ready to work hard and do whatever is required of them. And by the second day, still excited, but a little bit less. And by the third day, and I mean this metaphorically, it doesn't always take 3 days, but sometimes it does take 3 days. This is when people stop showing up. You think about any actual gym. At the beginning of the year, you got a whole bunch of people who you haven't seen before in January. By about Valentine's Day, a few of them have disappeared. And by around Easter, it's back to the same people who were there at the end of the previous year. And that's pretty much how it goes. So the third day is a metaphor for what happens when people see that the newness of this thing has worn off. The new car smell is gone. You realize that the thing that you signed up for is not one big party and it's not all going to be easy. And there's some actual work and some grind involved in it. And it's a decision that you make in that moment. See, it's not the action, not the action, but the experience of the third day happening is a decision that you make when the third day happens, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And then it's just a matter of what choice do you make in that moment. Are you going to continue to show up and deliver consistently like a professional does, or are you going to make the decision to either half-ass it or just quit and drop out of it like an amateur has the luxury of doing? But as a professional, Brad, you don't have the luxury of not showing up or not doing your job, because the definition of a professional is someone who does something as their main paid occupation. So if you're getting paid, you have to show up. You really don't have a choice. So that's what the third day is all about.
That's a great concept. I mean, obviously, like you said, metaphorically, it applies to a lot of stuff. The
Mm-hmm.
New Year's resolutions, the actual weightlifting gym, we all know that
Right.
January 1 is packed and then January 5, it's empty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so translating that into business, right? We all know, like, I mean, you've probably heard of like the 5 emotional stages of change, right? Optimistic and all that stuff. You get down to the valley of despair, which is probably like another metaphor for like the third day.
Yes.
What's the difference, like, of people that you've talked to, athletes that you've played with and all this stuff? What's the difference between someone who continues on the third day versus the guy who stops on the third day? Like, what are those characteristics?
There are several things, Brad. Number one is that they have an anchor just meaning what is the outcome that they're looking to achieve that they care about strongly enough that they're willing to deal with the discipline. Because discipline isn't always fun. I mean, so there are some days that all of us don't feel like going to work, whatever the work may be, even if you play a sport, even if you podcast for a living. Or there are days we just don't feel like doing the job. So do you have something that you care about strongly enough that it supersedes your desire to not have to do any work that day? Will you still show up and do your job? That's one. Second thing is the third day is a discipline. It becomes a discipline, something that you're doing consistently. You have to show up and with very little variance in your behavior over time. And discipline is a byproduct of structure. So the second answer to your question here is the people who actually can show up on the third day have a structure to how they show up, and a structure that puts them in a position to show up without them having to use willpower every single time. Because the third day is not about willpower or motivation. And it's not that either of those two things are bad things necessarily, Brad. It's just that willpower and motivation have a shelf life. There's only so much of it that you can draw on over the course of a day or even a week or a month before you don't have any more. And they're also not as consistent as other things, because let's just say you didn't get a lot of sleep the previous night. Well, your willpower battery is not as full as it would be when you got a full night of sleep. So on those nights when you didn't get any sleep, maybe you were up with a sick kid, or maybe you were arguing with your spouse, or maybe the neighbors were making too much noise, or you just got to bed late, whatever the situation was, you don't have as much motivation or willpower on that day as you had the previous days, but you still have to do your job because you're a professional. So what do you do on those days when the willpower can't drive you through? You have to have the structure and the system in place, and habits are a form of structure. So habits are a byproduct of structure. When you put the right structure in place, you follow discipline, habits come out of the bottom of the funnel, so to speak, because you're doing the same things the same way every time, to the point that your subconscious mind takes over the situation and you're not having to consciously remind yourself, okay, I got to go to the gym today. You already know you're going to the gym. It's a foregone conclusion because you've done it so many times as part of your routine, as part of your process. So those are two of the things. The anchor, there's the structure, and it's also just the professional commitment. The third thing is that just that commitment as a professional. You know that you're going to show up and do your job because it's your job. And again, if you're going to sign up to do something as a professional, then this is a big part of it, because there will be times that you don't really feel like doing that job. I'm sure maybe in the big picture you like the job, or maybe you like having it, or you like the benefits that you get from it. Maybe a lot of people know about you, or is the money or the prestige or the camaraderie with your people who you work with, whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean every single aspect of the job is fun, because in life, there are no perfect scenarios. There are only trade-offs. So everything has a trade-off. And sometimes we know about the trade-off and sometimes we don't till we get in it. But those three things to answer your question here: a clear anchor, something that'll pull you through that you care about enough. Number two, clear systems. And number three, professional commitment.
Got it. All right. I'm taking notes here while we're going. So some people, especially with my clientele, with dealing with contractors and stuff, like the structure stuff makes sense. And it seems like it would be easier for like an athlete where you know what you're doing every single day. You're going to the gym, you're whatever your routine is, whether it's shooting free throws first, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But for a lot of like business owners, their day is like chaotic and it changes. It can change almost every day. How do you suggest people structure their day where they may have an unstructurable day, if that even makes sense?
Yes, well, that's the way I live now as an entrepreneur. So we have unstructurable days. So one of the things is take the make sure you take clearly an account of what are the things that you know you have to do every day. What are the things that you absolutely have to get done? So if that means, for me, something that's not always so fun, or we got to go get some leads and we got to make sure they get put in the CRM, or at least I got to find the leads and I got to send them to my assistant and she has to put them in the CRM. And we got to make sure that gets done every day. That's not fun. I don't think anybody really enjoys that, but we have to do it. So we know that has to get done. I write a lot. So I know every day I have to make sure I have an article completed and saved in the folder so that we always have new material to put out and keep sending. I have to make sure I want to make sure the inbox is clean. So anything I got to forward to this person or that person, I don't want my inbox to be piled up with hundreds of unread emails. So I know I'm going to have to go through it at some point and toss things, delete things, unsubscribe from things, and respond to things. So what are the things that you know you need to do every single day, regardless of how unschedulable or how inconsistent your days are when it comes to activity by activity? I know I'm going to have to get on the phone. I do a good amount of speaking business, so I know I'm going to be getting on the phone to talk to people who could possibly bring me in as a speaker. So I know I'm going to be doing those things every day. I know I'm working out every day. I know I'm going to take my son outside for a walk twice a day. So I know the things that I absolutely have to do, and all the other things, they fit in around that. So you put your absolutes in first, then everything else fits around that.
Gotcha. So it's like the big rock theory, put the big rocks in first, fill it up with the rest of the stuff that you may not be as important each day. And then I guess I'm assuming that there's, you would have to have a little bit of flexibility in your scheduling to know, like, okay, typically I go to gym in the morning, but for whatever reason I call this or that, I'm going to have to hit the gym in the afternoon. And that's where that commitment part comes in.
Well, I go to the gym first thing in the morning every day, regardless. There's nothing that's going to get in the way of that. So if that means the schedule has to be moved. So, for example, my assistant knows that she doesn't book anything on the calendar. I don't care who it is, anytime outside of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's the latest we'll start. 9 a.m. is the earliest we'll start. So everything needs to fit into that, which is usual business hours for most people. So I rarely have a problem with that. Only in extenuating circumstances will I step outside of it, and she has to ask me before she does it. So my workouts are happening early in the morning. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning. So I'm getting my workouts in. I'm doing all my self-care stuff, all the stuff I want to do for me. I get that stuff in way early in the morning so that I know it's getting taken care of.
So higher priority stuff like health, self-care stuff, that really is a non-negotiable in terms of in your regular day. The other things, the emails, that can be it throughout the day. It just has to get done at some point.
Yeah, because that's work stuff. So I do the work stuff during quote unquote work hours. I do the self-care stuff in the mornings, because I did that even when I was an athlete, was wake up early, go get the workout in, then I could have time to do other stuff. And it's not even that one is a higher priority than the other. It's just that there are some things that are non-negotiable for me, and everybody has to know what those are for themselves. So if someone has kids, your kids are probably non-negotiables. So if you have something on the schedule with the kids, nothing goes around that. Nothing beats that. So not around it, but everything goes around it, because nothing is taking its spot on the calendar. So everyone has to know what their non-negotiables are, the absolute musts that you have. And the more things that you lock down as musts, you're going to get the outcomes of being consistent at those things. So you should be really intentional about what the musts are that you're putting in place in your calendar, because hopefully those are things that are leading to the outcomes you want.
Makes total sense. And I'm right there with you on that, all that. So let's look into the life of someone who wants to do all of these things, Dre, but for whatever reason just can't make it happen. Like what's happening in that person's life? Like what do you see in your dealings, business dealings, of what's keeping people from being able to do that, to accomplish those things?
What kind of things are we talking?
I mean, let's just say I want to work out. Let's say I'm overweight, 20 pounds overweight. I want to lose weight. I want to get in better shape. I want to go to the gym, every morning like we talked about, but I just can't consistently do it. Like what do you see in people in terms of their mindset or character or whatever it might be that is their biggest challenge to doing that?
Well, number one is they haven't made the decision that they're going to work out. That's really what it is. And the reason, and everything else that we're going to talk about after this is a sub reason as to why they haven't made the decision. So they have all these reasons, or if you want to call them excuses, for why the decision is the decision, or the indecision is the indecision. Because the root word of decision comes from a Latin word, decidere, which means to cut off. That's literally what it means, to cut off. So when you make a decision, you are cutting off every other possibility besides the thing you decided on. So once you cut off every other option, and that's where the word incision comes from. Incision means to cut. All right. So when you make a decision, then there's nothing else that's going to happen besides the thing that you said is going to happen. And the decision has to be, hopefully, you back it up with some structure or some type of process that makes it easy for you to follow through on the decision.
Hey, just a quick timeout from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community, the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs, and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates, and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how it can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
So if a person says they want to work out, or they know they need to work out, quote unquote, but they're not actually doing it, it's probably because they are setting themselves up to fail. They're not putting a process in place. So let's say they know to work out. They say I usually get up at 6 in the morning, but to work out, I'm gonna get up at 5 in the morning, work out at home or in the gym in my community before I go to work. But they're not doing it. And they keep waking up at 5:45 or 5:50 instead of 5 a.m. like they're supposed to. Now, why is that happening? Now we can start deconstructing. Well, okay, if you're going to wake up at 5 in the morning, you probably need to go to bed at 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night. But instead, you're staying up till 11:30 watching TV. So you are setting yourself up to fail because you're not making it easy for you to follow through on your own decision. So a decision also always has these sub decisions that need to be made in the process. So if you're going to work out every day, you're probably going to need to put some good food in your body and maybe some extra fuel, because you're burning more calories doing that workout than when you were not working out. But you're eating pizza and hot dogs for lunch. Okay, so you don't have the fuel. So that's another sub decision that's setting you up to fail. Or you say, okay, I'm going to work out. I'm going to work out at home in my basement, but you don't have any workout equipment at home, and you don't even know what kind of workout you're going to do. So maybe one day you wake up, you go down to the basement, and you don't even know what to do. You're sitting there like, okay, now what do I do? Because you don't have a plan. So you didn't go and look up 100 videos on YouTube that you can watch and save them on a playlist. So each day you can just pick one and go do the workout. Or you don't have the equipment, or you don't have the workout gear, or you forgot to change the light bulb in the basement, so now it's dark and you can't do the workout. So there's all these sub decisions that go behind the decision that makes it easier for you to follow through on something. So we often hear the stories of someone says, well, I made a decision that I was going to do X. And then they tell you the great story of how they went and did X and they became successful, and everybody's blown away like, wow, what'd they do? And I won't even say but Brad, there's a whole bunch of other sub decisions that make following through on the main decision a lot easier. So you're setting yourself up for success. And that's part of the discipline as well. What else has to happen in order for me to do this, this, and this? So if I know I have a flight that's taking off at 6 o'clock in the morning, okay, well, I know I need to be at the airport an hour earlier to check the bag. I'll give myself an extra 30 minutes just in case somebody's late. So that's 4:30 in the morning. I got to be at the airport. If I got to be at the airport at 4:30, it takes 15 minutes to leave. I'll give myself 30 minutes. I got to leave the house at 4 o'clock to catch the Uber. And it takes me about an hour plus to get ready in the morning, which means I got to get up at 3, give myself another cushion of time just in case I'm late. I got to be up at 2:30 in the morning. So that's deconstructing the process. Like knowing that I had to do this, I deconstruct backwards so that I'm never bumping up against a limit or just bumping up against a barrier because I'm preparing ahead of time. So this is all just thinking. Like, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm just thinking, what are all the steps that we had to take to make sure that this decision gets followed through on properly? So that's the answer to your question, is that people are allowing a whole bunch of other sub decisions or indecisions to get in the way of the main decision that has not yet been made.
I think it's fair to say that you're a high achiever, right? You're a high performer, and I think we can all agree with that.
So.
And a lot of people who are also high performers would say 100%, that's exactly what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the ones who are not high performers? Like you said, those little indecisions or there's sub things that are keeping people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I know, again, for a high performer, this is pretty black and white and easy to understand. But
Correct.
maybe someone who's not a high performer, but wants to try and step up their game is struggling with that. What
Right.
what are some things that's keeping them from being able to do that?
Yes, great follow-up question. So now let's talk about the people who have not and don't think like that. It's understanding that the process for achieving anything in life is a 3-step process. It always goes in the same direction. This applies to anyone. It is be, do, have. Those 3 steps in that order always. Being, doing, and having. What does that mean? Well, let's deconstruct that. So the having is the outcome. All right, the outcome that person wants to achieve. So give me an example of what we'll use here, Brad, for this as I deconstruct this.
Well, I mean, we could use the weightlifting thing again. Let's say reading. I want to start reading books, but I hate reading.
Okay, so let's say they want to read 30 minutes a day, but they hate reading, so they're not doing it, even though they bought all these books, but they haven't opened one yet. Okay, so the outcome is you want to have read the book, or you at least want to get the knowledge or the inspiration or insight that comes from the book. That's the outcome that you want. All right, most of us understand this concept is called goals. All right, these are things that we want to achieve, a goal. So I want to lose weight, I want to make this much money, I want to get this position in my company, I want to read these books. That's the outcome. That's the having. Now, we all understand, most people who have control of their mental capacities understand mental faculties that you had to do something to get an outcome. You can't just get something for nothing. You got to do something. So I'm going to lose weight. I can't just sit on the couch and think about it. I have to actually exercise probably and watch how I eat. So most people understand this. And even though they may not do it, but we still need to think about it. What needs to happen in order for me to do this? If I'm going to read 30 minutes a day, looking at my current lifestyle, somewhere, somehow, some way, I have to carve out 30 minutes. And since human beings are creatures of habit, we need to probably carve out the same 30 minutes every time, every single day, the same time every day. So whether that's first thing in the morning, if it's during your lunch hour, if it's at night before you go to sleep, somewhere we want to carve it out so it's consistent. So it's not like 11:30 on this day and 2:30 next day and 1:15 the day after that. That randomness, your brain's never going to get on the right process, and you're not going to be able to keep it up. So we want it to be consistent. So this is, you find anybody who's in great physical shape, ask them what time do they work out every day. I guarantee you there's an answer. It's not like, well, just whenever I get around to it. Nobody answers that who's in great shape. All right, ask anybody who's doing great with their business. Ask them, how often do you do this thing? It's going to be a consistency to it. Anybody who's good at something, they're doing it consistently on a micro basis, meaning day to day, and consistently on a macro basis, meaning how they do it, how they think about it. So the second step is, what are you going to do? And it needs to go on the calendar. It has to be scheduled. A schedule is one of the simplest ways that anyone can start implementing systems in their lives, is through a calendar. Everybody has access to a calendar. They're free on your phone. And so that's the doing part. What exactly am I going to have to do to make this work? And sometimes it's one step, like reading a book. Sometimes it could be multiple steps, but we know we had to do something. All right. Now the third thing, and we're working backwards here. Third thing is the being. And this is the part, Brad, that many people overlook, or they don't even overlook it because they're not even aware that they're missing it, because it never even occurs to them that this is missing. In order for any human being to change their consistent behavior, the first thing we must change is our mindset around that behavior. A human being cannot behave consistently in a way that is incongruent with the way we see ourselves or the way that we see the world. So our mindset has to change in order for our actions to change. And when our actions change, then our outcomes change. The biggest challenge that many people have in the world, period, Brad, is that they try to change their actions without changing their mindset. So they are unable to make those action changes permanent, or they're unable to even implement the action change to even begin with. Therefore, they have the idea that they want to change, but they never actually change. All people end up doing for the big part in life is doing different versions of the same actions and then lamenting the frustration that they have because they're not getting a different outcome. And the reason people are unable to change their actions is not because they're dumb and not because they want to be less than successful, is because they don't know how, or they're not aware that they need to change their mindset. And I see this a lot of times working with entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs, and professionals, period, because entrepreneurs and professionals usually think they're so damn smart. They think they know everything and that they don't need any more information. So they're actually some of the hardest people to get to change, because they think they know everything they need to know. And since we all are aware that 99% of the known information in the world is available to all of us at our fingertips virtually for free, most people think, okay, well, I'll just go get the information and then I'll change. The problem is, there's several problems with this. Number one, since there's so much information available, you don't know which information to look for. Number two, you don't know whether the information you find is the right information or not. And number three, you don't know how to implement the information. So the information overload that we have access to these days actually makes it harder, not easier. And the reason it makes it harder is because people think, okay, well, I got access to the information, so I get to it when I get to it because the information is not going away. But the problem is you're looking in the ocean trying to find that one cup of water that you need, but you don't know what to look for. So this is what gets people lost. But this is the reason why the coaching and training and consulting industries exist, to help people make sense of the information that they have, rather than just accessing random information, hoping that you'll be able to figure it out. Because if all it took to change people's mindsets, thus their actions and their outcomes, was information, then everybody in the world should be successful, because we all got it. We all got access to it for free.
Yeah. So the thought that come to mind on that, obviously, is there is an overwhelming amount of information out there, right? So there is definitely information overload. Like if you lived in some third world country and there was one library and that's all you had access to, and you went to that library and there was one book on how to get in shape, you probably wouldn't have an issue, right? Because like that's the only piece of information that you have to follow, and so you would follow it. How much of that? Okay, this is a good topic, because like with information overload, like, or just the amount of information out there. I mean, how do you personally, and how do you help some of people you work with decipher like what information is good information?
Great question. So the first thing is actually what I just talked about. This is what I help them do. First of all, let's get clear on what you want, because I need to know what somebody wants before I can help them. And when I'm clear on what they want, and then I find out what they've been doing, and then I talk to them a little bit about, okay, in a big picture way, a high level, here's the things that need to happen in order for us to get to this outcome. And then I go to work on their mindset, because a mindset change is technically, on the Tony Robbins level, on a decision happens that quickly, right? The snap of a finger, you make a decision that this is no longer acceptable. Now the new standard is this. And yes, that it can happen that quickly when you have the right material already in place. You've laid the groundwork. That can happen. For many people, however, it's a little bit longer process, because we have to undo a lot of the nonsense that they've been taught and that they've ingrained and that they've come to believe. And that's the biggest challenge I deal with a lot of entrepreneurs, is that they've ingrained a lot of mental things that are simply not serving them. And then they go into this habit of, okay, well, let me just go get some more information, or let me go take another course, or let me watch another YouTube video, and that'll solve everything, when that's not actually the issue. What has to change is how they see themselves. Biggest thing that has to change is who you see when you look in the mirror. When that changes, because you're a different type of person, then you will take different actions, and those different actions will lead to different outcomes. And it's not that your actions need to be so radically different from what you were doing before, because most people are pretty smart. If you listen to the show, you're probably pretty smart. So it's not that your actions are going to be so much different from what you've been doing up to this point, but a change in how you see yourself. Self-image makes the slightest tweak or a moderate tweak to your actions that lead to a difference in outcomes, because energy is 85% of what happens in life. Energy is everything. And energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's merely transfer from one object to another, and it changes forms even within the same object. So when we change our mindsets and the way that we see ourselves and the way we see the world, that shift in energy, that transmutation of energy, can affect our actions in such a way that it completely changes the outcomes. So that's really what it is helping people change their mentality and the paradigms through which they're seeing the world. That's the biggest change that has to happen. And the reason why it doesn't happen in so many people, reason why most people become a certain type of person by their mid-20s and they stay like that until they die, is simply because most people are not even aware that this needs to happen. And even when they are aware, it's hard to grasp, because you can't see your mindset. You can only talk about it. You can feel it, but you can't see it.
So this is good. This is great stuff, by the way. So I've been listening to the book Soundtracks. Have you read that one?
No.
Soundtrack. That's another good one. Anyways, it's about the thoughts that we tell ourselves, right? Overthinkers.
Correct.
I don't know about you, Dre, but I'm a recovering overthinker, right? Like spend, the whole time in the shower thinking about that one phrase I said 2 weeks ago to that person on the elevator, like things like that, right?
Mm,
And in the book, he talks about most of us are looking for a switch. We're looking for a switch that we can just flip and then change everything about us. But in reality, it's a dial.
that's
And
correct.
so you were talking about like your self-image, how we see ourselves. And I think you would agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like our self-talk is what really helps develop our self-image, right? What we say to ourselves. Gosh, that's so stupid. Why do I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I, fail to do this, blah, 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 blah. And so like with the dial, you have to, you're like you said, awareness. First of all, we got to be aware of our self-talk. And then we have to be able, when we're talking negatively, be able to turn that dial down. And then as we work on that, actually be able to detect the signs that we're about to do something negative or say something negative rather. And so can you speak just a little bit about like self-talk? Like, is that something you've ever struggled with, or have you just like always been, get it done and never think anything different?
I don't believe I've struggled with it because it's something, when it comes to mindset, something I've been reading about and studying for a long time. So what you're talking about is what Napoleon Hill calls autosuggestion. Autosuggestion is just suggestions that we make to ourselves. And that is what self-talk is, because all thinking is a Q&A session that we're having with ourselves. And it's just an ongoing Q&A session. It never ends. So the framing of the question determines the quality of the answer. All right. Just like a good lawyer in court. All right. When they're trying to direct the witness. So that self-conversation is part of a process that over here we call it mental conditioning. The same way that physically you had to condition your body to perform, you condition your mind to perform. And that conditioning process is done over a consistent period of time based on what you're saying to yourself on a daily basis. So this is something that I coach people on. And so that auto suggestion, again, is based on the Q&A session that we're having in our own heads. And there's a conditioning process. We call it the bulletproof mindset framework that helps people start reconditioning their minds and deconditioning from the nonsense that is not serving you and reconditioning the stuff that actually will serve you, that you're going to supply. So we actually walk people through how to actually do this. And then when it comes to certain aspects of lives, it's also helping people unlearn the things they thought that they knew and learning the things that they need to know in order to move themselves forward. And it's often just a change, again, that shift in mindset combined with the knowledge and intellect and skill that the person already has can lead to a breakthrough. But we have to shift the mindset first. And the biggest challenge, as I said, Brad, for a lot of people is that they don't want to shift the mindset. They just want to change the actions. The problem is what it leads to is people being physically diligent, but mentally lazy. And that's where they end up falling short.
Physically diligent, but mentally lazy. That's my new phrase. I'm writing this down. So we want to make the change. We think we want to make the change, but we're mentally lazy to make the change. Now, how much of this mental, let's call it garbage, is created during childhood?
A good amount of it is created in adolescence and childhood simply because our brains are so wide open and malleable at that time. But it's also, let's say, for example, when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs, it's just a matter of what are some of the first things that they came across or what initially has worked for them. And when the ground shifts underneath them, a lot of times people are slow to adjust.
Or they make a complete change, like out of left field change in their business uh, without actually looking at the data. And then they just completely change the way they do everything and basically start over. Have you ever dealt with entrepreneurs that do that?
I've dealt with entrepreneurs who tried to do that, and I stop them before they get there. So, and the other thing is also resilience and a certain amount of mental toughness, because if you are not sure of yourself or sure of your process and things are not working, then you may be more willing to kind of bail and throw it overboard than to keep working on it because you're not sure you're in the right place anyway. And that happens a lot with entrepreneurs. When they first come to me, they're very unsure of themselves and what they're doing. They need someone to tell them, okay, the path you're on, this actually can work. We just got to do it the right way. or the path you're on, this is never going to work no matter how hard you work at it, because you just have a inaccurate formula of what this is actually going to produce. And this is why I love doing what I'm doing as a coach, because helping people just get the insights and the understandings of what they're doing and why it works based on principles, not just based on my personal opinion. So I help people understand the principles behind what they're doing or not doing, why it applies to them, and how they need to use it instead of going against it.
Brilliant. Love it. Mm-hmm. So since we're on that, like if somebody's interested in your services and wanting to get in touch with you, where would they go to find that information, or how would they do that?
WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. That's our coaching program site. That's where we do all our consulting, speaking, etc. Work on Your Game University, all our courses as well.
Gotcha. And we'll put that in the link to that in the show notes too for anybody interested. Is there a specific type of client that you try to work with? I mean, is there anybody who's not qualified?
Well, we have different levels of our program. So our ideal client is an entrepreneur who's earning at least $150,000 a year in revenue. And this is a person who sees themselves as a high performer. This is a person who wants to perform at their highest level. And we help people with mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability to make sure everything gets implemented. And this is a performance and results-based business. So if that sounds like you, then you're our person.
Awesome. So, Dre, what is the one question I should have asked you?
It's a good question. One question you should have asked me. What is something that people can start doing? No, you kind of already asked me that one. I don't know. I got to think about that. I wasn't expecting the question.
It's a good question.
It is a good question. So we talked a lot about mindset, and I think that's really that's the foundation of all success and all failure. So I'm glad we spent a considerable amount of time there, because that's really the biggest shift that people need to make: the thought process shift, then the action shift, and then the outcome shift. So I don't think you missed anything, not that I'm thinking of right now.
So if I hearing you for the first time and I'm like just having an awakening where I'm like, oh crap, like I actually have negative self-talk and I sabotage myself and this is new to me. Is there a book that you've written or one that you recommend that they would go read to kind of start learning about this whole new awakening of mindset?
Yeah, it's my book called The Mental Workbook, which is all about programming the subconscious mind. That's literally why I wrote it. And it's a workbook. It's not just a reading book. You actually will write in the book. So when you go to, if you go to mirrorofmotivation.com, that's one of my free books, free lead funnels. And when you go through that funnel, we're going to offer you the mental workbook in that funnel. So we don't sell you just one book. I got a bunch of them. So we'll give you the Mirror Motivation. As you go through it, we're going to offer you what we call the Mental Game Super Duper Bundle, and it includes 4 books. One of them is that one, the Mental Workbook that I just mentioned.
Gotcha. Okay, so the Mental Workbook, you can get it through that funnel. And again, we can put that link in the show notes as well.
Sure.
Yeah, Dre, this was awesome. Thanks for being on the show. For your experience, you have a ton of high performance, in sports at the top level, and then translating into business and even in marketing. So I really appreciate your time being on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Brad. I appreciate you sharing your platform.
And then one last question. You kind of just told me, but let's say your books are not available. Okay, we got to throw your books out. What is one book that you would recommend somebody read?
Based on what we talked about here, I would go with The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill.
Law of Success. Good book. Good book. Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Dre, for being on the show. Guys, you know where to find me on the socials, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, all those. Just search for the Hammer and Grind Podcast. And until next time, guys, remember, profit is not a dirty word.